related to movement and the distribution of economic activities, as well as urban vitality. So this is the Nile, and this is Greater Cairo, which is split, the running river is split it into Cairo and Giza, where the pyramids are, and all of it is called Greater Cairo. And there are two main desert roads link Cairo to the Red Sea. This is the Suez road. This is Ismailia, and this is the road to Ain Sokhna. All are famous ports on the Red Sea. In between is New Cairo city. So actually, this is where the AUC campus is, and we are in between the two desert motorways to the Red Sea. The displacement of growth and the urban displacement happened here first. So this is New Cairo, and then this is the under construction new capital city or new administrative capital city. So very soon all the ministries will move to New Cairo, new administrative capital city. So this is the direction of growth. This is New Cairo. New Cairo is linked with Cairo, with Old Cairo, through the ring road. The ring road is going around, and then we have the regional ring road, and then we have the two main desert motorways to the Red Sea, and in between is the new city that we are in, New Cairo. New Cairo has two artery roads, these ones, and the open up here. They call it the Lotus district here, and exactly here is the AUC campus, and this is how it was formed in terms of urban planning. So this is the old CAD map. This is the old CAD map of the city before construction. And we can see that there are two artery roads that extends the city or elongated in a new fashion way compared to the old city of, or the ancient Cairene districts and what we call under the umbrella of Arab cities. The master plan of the city was exposed to several physical interventions in spanning on 20 years only, or actually 10 years. We had these kind of from 10 to 20 years, we have different transformations. So for example, while planning this area between the two artery roads, there was, I know it is not very clear, there was a link between both of them. However, it was cancelled to sell a whole land for a private compound. For example, roundabouts, most of them were cancelled. The main ring road that links New Cairo to Cairo has also some physical interventions through time. The tunnel lately was cancelled, and that kind of flower-shaped bridges linked all directions. So we have, every now and then we have changes across the city. Here also, the roundabout was cancelled, and there was a long bridge with two flyovers. Such developments or such interventions have been introduced to the original master plan. And the reason behind this is the need to speed up the traffic, particularly to the direction of the new administrative capital city. So further away. So actually, this is not very far from where we are now. This is where the monorail is extending right now. These were the pillars under construction, and the AUC campus is somewhere. Sorry about this one. The AUC campus is somewhere there, and this is the wood that should get to the new administrative capital city and the like. So Eastern Cairo and the new planned cities have been changing a lot in terms of traffic, speeding up traffic, and to reach the new capital city. This actually brings a hypothesis in the mind of the policymaker. By doing such interventions, the hypothesis was that we are facilitating traffic and movement across the city to reach the new capital. However, this was a matter of investigation. Are we really facilitating natural movement through the city? So let's see. This is another example. This is a famous plot here in New Cairo City. They call it the business core. It is on the first side of the city, close to the ring road, somewhere there. These are the two artery roads. They are 90 meters wide, so they call it the 90-meter north and the 90 meters south. North 90 means north 90 and the south 90, okay? And in between is the business core. The business core included some banks on both sides and some headquarters, administrative, one of the very famous oil companies in Egypt. However, the practice of the normal employees and the people who are residing on both sides actually introduced new need for parking areas, and actually most of the bank road turned into restaurants. Yeah, so there was an original land use plan, strategic plan, but through time people change it into something else. And this actually made us wonder, was it a problem in the original master plan, or is it a normal transformation? This is one question. The second question is, are we actually facilitating movement? Yes, we are extending roads to the new administrative capital city, but how would I go and visit and shop internally through the city? So there are two layers, two levels of movement here that are being challenged. Street vendors, although this is one of the high-class planned cities, that was the intention at the beginning. However, we have been noticing every now and then that we are seeing such street vendors in the city. It is not something that we are criticizing, but if it was planned from the beginning that we will need such small cafes and sandwich bars and these kind of handy and cheap kind of products, why didn't we include it in the original master plan? Or this is can we count this as a smart solution to mobilize the city and deal with the daily needs? This is the new master plan according to the New Urban Communities Authority. It's a governmental body here in Egypt, 2021, with some modifications happened on the original master plan. So let's go to science then. The configurational structure of cities shapes movement flows and land use patterns, with some land uses seeking richer movement while others migrate to quieter areas, such as residential. Economic values follow the same process. Hillier and Stoner have shown that the city creation process involves cities developing into different areas according to their position in the street network. Although they still remain close to each other, Hillier explains that the centers of vitality and livability are located in areas where there is a significant correlation between local and global integration, which is called synergy. This is a measurement in the theory of space syntax, synergy. The spatial configuration of the city can be examined by checking the correlation between local and global integration. So we are going to measure integration for the city on a local level and global level, so then we can identify the spatial configuration and synergy of the city. And this is why to determine the ability of the network structure to generate movement patterns. The relationship between these two levels of integration is an important factor that determines the degree of local through and global inside-out movement, and this is called the natural movement of a city. Spatial configuration refers to how spatial elements such as squares, streets, and alleys are connected to each other to form the city network, from which we can deduce the global patterns of the city. In examining New Cairo City's growth over the past 2 decades, a discrepancy emerges between the use of the service areas envisaged in the general strategic plan and what is happening on the ground. The new startups were stationed along the 2 main arterial roads of the city, the northern and southern 90 axis, expanding horizontally because this was the most integrated area in the fabric of the city. However, this is no longer the case with regard to service centers within neighborhoods as presented in the master plan, since these centers are neglected by the residents. The arterial roads span the city and can be accessed with more to and through commuting. Oops. So we identified 3 phenomena to test the city or to look at such behavior in the city before and after these imposed interventions: urban vitality, dual structure of cities, and natural movement. With urban vitality, we mean a logic for describing the occupancy of an urban center through the day and in different locations. The dual structure of cities, as explained by Professor Bill Hillier and Professor Julian Hanson in 1984 in the Social Logic of Space book. The foreground network of a city is generated by microeconomic activity and tends to maximize movement, while the background network is generated by the socio-cultural factors and limits and structures movement and then minimizing synergy. So our aim is to understand how social and economic phenomena that relate to the community of new cities, particularly those that extend urbanally from the old city like the city of New Cairo, are transformed. We developed a framework for combining quantitative and qualitative analysis to help in understanding the phenomena related to the morphology of the development of the new city, using syntactic analysis, which we will introduce right now, space syntax and field observation. The spatial characteristics of the city of New Cairo were investigated, then compared with Old Cairo to determine which features were enriched in terms of the city's vitality or what has been lost during the expansion phases, and to stand on the applied modern planning concepts. This was a proposed framework for our research, includes some quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis. Space syntax theory has 2 main propositions. The first is that space is not a background to human activity, but center to it. This means that each kind of human activity has its own spatial pattern. The second property is that space is configurational. Buildings and cities are configurations. Configuration means not simply relations in a complex network, but relations which take into account other relationships. The spatial configuration of buildings and cities affects or can be affected by people's activities. People activities vary and such, and likewise the spatial configuration. We actually move in lines, we interact in convex spaces, but also we have views and sights around us, so we can change our visual fields as we move. So there are types and levels in space syntax theory analysis, such as the isovist, which is the field of view from any particular point, the axial space, a straight sight line and possible path, the convex space, an occupiable void where, if we imagined as a wireframe diagram, no line between 2 of its points goes outside its perimeter. All points within the polygon are visible to all other points within the polygon. These are examples of the three measurements of a city here using the space syntax definitions. This is an isovist space. So this is where we sit inside and we can have different views. This is an axial space. A configuration of a building or an urban network can be transferred into such axial relationships, what we call the justified graph. And here is the convex space. Measurements used in our investigation, we are actually going to analyze New Cairo city before and after the interventions, and then compare it to the famous neighborhood of Cairo, and then see the structural properties before and after, and reach our conclusions. So we will use the measurement of integration, synergy, and intelligibility. Integration or closeness centrality indicates the closeness of each element to all other elements in the system for global integration, and to all other elements up to certain radius for local integration. Integration reflects movement, occupation, social and economic activities in spaces. Synergy describes the relationship between the parts and the whole in the urban system by analyzing it at two levels of integration, local and global. It shows how internal urban systems relate to the large-scale system. It is examined through the correlation between local integration at a certain radius and global integration. Intelligibility is the correlation between connectivity, the local measure, and global integration, the closeness centrality. It shows to what extent what can be seen from space is a good guide what cannot be seen, to what cannot be seen. On the left side is New Cairo spatial analysis. This is a global integration measure for New Cairo. On the right side is the global integration measure for the new administrative capital city. Yeah, we can also see some characteristics in both planning systems, which happened recently. When recently, I say in the last couple of decades, we have this one. Most of it is built. This is under construction. These are the artery lines that extend from two. High integration is resembled by the reddish color, while the blue shows the segregation in the urban network. This is a comparison before and after the imposed interventions on New Cairo as a case study, and we can see the difference in the levels of integration, particularly around the artery roads. So the artery roads have been bridged over, so there have been more integrated business-like kind of a core. However, we can see the residential neighborhoods are somehow less integrated, more quiet, which is possible, which is reasonable. Okay. By actually correlating intelligibility before and after, the scatter plot shows a low degree of intelligibility in 2009 that decreased to in 2020 after the imposed interventions, which was actually against the first hypothesis that these kind of interventions will facilitate movement through the city. So the scatter plot is showing something different. It shows that there are dramatic structural changes in the properties of the spatial structure of the city. The city has become more confusing and the city is more labyrinthine after such interventions. On the lower scatter plot, which compares synergy before and after, the synergy scatter plot shows the correlation values of for the city of New Cairo before 2009 and after 2020. The relationship between these two levels of integration is a significant factor, as it determines the degree of internal local movement and the global in-out movement and through movement. Synergy before 2009 was more than after 2020, resulting in lower levels of movement and vitality. We actually worked on the scale of neighborhood to find out that neighborhoods in the city of New Cairo have very little or minimal number of accesses in each neighborhood. Most of us who live in this city, actually we suffer if we didn't catch the right access to the neighborhood. We have to go around and around in circles. It's like a golf compound that we keep moving around. So it was noticed and it was tested using the syntactic analysis of the neighborhoods of New Cairo, but also it was compared with some of the famous neighborhoods of Old Cairo districts. So Nasr City, Maadi, Zamalek, Fatimid Cairo, Heliopolis, the new administrative capital city as well, and some of the new planned cities like New Cairo, 6th of October, Burj Al Arab, New Damietta, and the like. Central Cairo, Garden City, Khedivi Ismail Cairo. And then we created the justified graph for each of these, and we can see if the network is deep or shallow. So the structural properties between the old cities and the old districts and the new cities can be investigated in this way. The J-graph is considered a picture of the depth from a specific space to all other spaces. So to conclude, the study concluded that changes in the characteristic of the spatial configurations of the new Egyptian cities by increasing the flow of vehicular traffic via wide arterial roads do not actually reflect the requirements of the local community, instead impede local movement within the city and reduce the integration of its neighborhoods, turning them into isolated islands. The greatest impact of this is the way in which the characteristics of society in these cities have been limited to, resulting in isolation and a lack of connection with the identity of the place and the customs of and traditions of the community. And I would like to use this, to exploit this opportunity to in tribute to Professor Belhelier, who passed away few years ago after his contribution to this area of science and research through the launch of the space syntax theory. Thank you so much for your attention, and we are ready to. I would like actually, before I end this presentation, I would like to salute my colleague. We co-authored this research with Ms. Asma El-Dayasti, PhD student at Cairo University, started her PhD, and we have been working together on this piece of work actually 3 years ago till now. So thank you so much.
Wants to ask questions. Okay.
Well, thank you a lot for your presentation. So I understand that the vitality and all those descriptors are based on movement, right? You want people to move around, right? How do you position this approach and strategy to what was done 100 years ago by Le Corbusier, or more recently revamped by Carlos Moreno, the idea of this 15-minute city, where you have everything within 15 minutes walk, easy connection. Is that some kind of concept that you try to implement in New Cairo, for instance, or not really? You just want people to move?
I wish if we have 15 minutes walking across New Cairo city to reach its sides.
But that implies that you luckily have work there, cities, you have health, you have culture, you have everything within 15 minutes.
Yes, luckily the old cities across the world, with the variation of cultures and traditions, actually responded to the pedestrian movement and their needs and their social gathering spaces, urban spaces. All of these were practiced in the European and in the countries. Right now, we have a problem of extending our cities in such an elongated way. So then we are relying much on our vehicular capacities and such. We cannot actually move easily or practice our walks as it was all time. I would like to invite Asma to the stage as well, because she's doing her PhD about walkability. She just started, and this is actually a factor that we are looking for, how the new city is transforming our social need and our habits and behavior between the old city and the new one. So yeah. تتكلمي على walkability property مثلا. مش عارف تتكلمي على. أو ممكن تقولي لي وأنا أترجم لو حابة. يعني إجابتك إيه على سؤال ال walkability؟ Okay. We can take another question until we are ready.
First of all, thank you for the very interesting presentation. It's really interesting for me, and the area of urban planning is one of the areas I really like. But I have a question also related to New Cairo. I don't know whether this could be part of the scope of urban planning or not. The issue of flash floods. Flash floods. The floods yes. that we find in every winter here.
Yeah.
Directly, I mean, suddenly you find a very big amount of water that yep. stops or clogs all the routes here. Could it have been avoided ahead of time if maybe the routes of the streets were planned in a different way? Could it have been avoided or not?
There are two reasons behind this. We are actually, we have published a paper about the new administrative capital city in this, particularly in this regard.
Yep.
We have been testing different scenarios, flood simulations, and then see the mild risk and high risk and how it divides the city. There are physical topography of the city that actually controls this in a way. Yes. And there is also the planning of the city, okay? Yep. When I mentioned in my study about New Cairo, we said it is somehow, it was meant to be, because this was actually a tendency in the first original master planning to have some kind of isolated neighborhoods and then to get off all the services to the main business cores or to the main artery roads. This is completely different from that intertwining services that we used to have in our old cities. Okay, this is one side of it. The second side, when we had flashing floods here in Cairo, in New Cairo, actually, a few years ago, we were actually on campus here, and suddenly we have rainy storms, and we couldn't even move from those segregated islands to cross over the artery road to reach the supermarket, and some actually areas haven't been served with any supplies for about few days a week. Yeah, and this actually was the result of building inside the flood torrent. So here, New Cairo city was actually divided into the first district, the third, and the fifth. Yeah. In between was actually two flashing floods, and one of them was unfortunately sold to people to build their houses in, and they were actually threatened by the floods, and we have seen lots of videos and photos 3 years ago about their basements, and were all flashed in floods and sunken and stuff like that. So yeah, it is not a very successful model to resist the raining floods here in the city, unfortunately. But some other cities were actually considered they considered the planning, the physical structure of the topography, and they avoided the flood torrents. And there are very successful examples around us. The city of Madinati, which is very close from here, 20 kilometers from here. And some other cities I don't have in mind right now. But the paper we did here actually compared between the original master plan of the new capital, which was planned by the American planners SOM, which was completely and drastically changed into a completely new planning system, which didn't take into consideration the flood torrents of the region. It was originally planned to consider the flood torrents, but then it was completely ditched for some kind of a reason, and the planning which is happening right now is not. And if you go to this paper, you will find the comparison between the two planning systems. Yeah. أفهم؟ مش مشكلة خلاص. It's fine. Thank you so much. Any other question or?
Those are questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.